On July 17th, Fish received its first major update. The Leviathan update, coming after a few seasonal events, was the first real major content added to the world. As one would expect, it brought new fish, rods, boats, as well as updates to things like a crafting system and a new proper quest system. It also added the titular Leviathan as a sort of boss event. I was curious to see what had been changed, especially how the quest system could build upon the more rudimentary quests the game already had. There were, of course, other sneaking suspicions that I had in the back of my mind. But I didn't give Jimmy much thought until I started hearing some reports and whispers of interesting new additions in the update. I didn't know what or how much to expect, but it seemed pretty unanimous that this update shed some more light on our Snowman mystery. So, even though I didn't expect this to happen so soon, let's dive back into the world of Fish to see what we can uncover about the mystery of the Snowman. Let's catch ourselves up to speed first though. If you're not familiar with the story at all, I recommend watching my first video, but I'll provide a quick and dirty summary here, especially to make sure I clean up some details that were a little iffy in the first video. In short, sometime around the full release of the world Fish, players started reporting some strange events. Firstly, some players found notes on 2 of the islands in the world. They depicted scratchy renditions of some strange creature with ominous messages. Secondly, some players seemed to have an encounter with this very creature. Strange ambience would play, and upon looking around, they would encounter a black figure in the distance that appeared to be the very same one in those notes. It would, of course, disappear upon being seen. And none of this was any kind of rumor either. It even reached a point where the developers added a toggle so players who really didn't want to get a little bit of a jump scare could disable the Snowman altogether. It was a rare event, but definitely part of the game. Players would come to dub this creature the Snowman, or Jimmy if you're cool with him, I guess. His lankier appearance, the notes, and his general nature definitely drew a lot of comparisons to Slenderman, though some also drew comparisons to a similarly named creation of Dr. Nowhere. I can't directly say if either served as an inspiration though. Being curious myself, I looked deeper into the game, and from what I could gather, there are a couple other crumbs of evidence related to the Snowman. We know that, according to Crescent Isles, he seemed to appear through a portal during a cave-in in the volcano. He also appeared tied to the Luxian Dunes in many ways. There's a side area in the dunes tied to a quest, and a certain shrine in there has a symbol that seems to resemble the Snowman's head. When filled out, the shrine grants access to the volcano in the Crescent Isles, which is near the caves he was originally sighted in. The Luxian Dunes is also home to human skeletons. Of note considering there are no other human creatures in this game. The other NPCs are more Animal Crossing-esque cutesy animals, with the Snowman being the only thing really resembling a human outside of the players. In the last video, I also suggested that the Snowman may be tied to an event called the Great Splash that some NPCs allude to. However, upon speaking with a wizard NPC who has more direct information about the Great Splash, I could safely say the Snowman isn't related to it. That was, for a while, where we were left. There came 2 seasonal updates, but not much of note. The first major thing of note to happen was right after the Easter event, where the vendor for it just fucking died. Bungo the Rabbit, yeah, that was his name apparently. I don't really remember for myself. He wound up dead after the event had ended. He had actually mentioned the last event's host, Oscar, also disappearing, so someone or something seemed to be after the event hosts. A teaser in the spawn room before the Leviathan update suggested that someone would be on the case. And with the update, a new islander named Hemlock appeared in the lighthouse. Players were actually able to put themselves to the test and try and solve this murder mystery. This is where a newly added quest chain began. Players would help the detective first by interviewing 3 suspects and then later giving him a halibut. From there, the investigation turned to the mysterious lighthouse on the island and its missing owner. We make way to Crescent Isle to gather more information on him. We learn his name, Norman, and that he never made it out of that same cave-in that apparently summoned the Snowman. He seemed to just vanish into thin air. We check in on his wife Brenda, who speaks a little more and gives us the keys. With that, we can finally access the lighthouse. Well, I guess this might explain the other 2 notes. There's also a ladder in the lighthouse that you can access, but seems to just lead to the light itself. Maybe it was also just the weather spawns for me, but the room got more and more red as I was in there. I didn't want to hang around and see why that was. Our quest log tells us to find evidence. Searching under the stairs, we'll find a strange pyramid, which completes our task. It should come as no surprise this brings us back to the Luxian Dunes. We go to that same side area with a shrine that resembled the Sunman. When we show the pyramid to Ozames, he has some interesting things to say.
Where did you get that? Now it all makes sense why I awoke. Someone used this to break him free from his prison in the Shadow Realm. It has been my sworn duty to guard the Shadow Realm while I slumbered. And now, the world is in peril once again.
We were tasked with entering the Shadow Realm ourselves, or the Twilight Realm, in order to continue our investigation. This, however, proved a dead end, with us not even knowing what way to access the Twilight Realm. At least for a time. July 24th saw the surprisingly quick release of the second part of the update, known as the Pyramid Update. It should come as no surprise where this directed our attention to. Olga, an NPC outside one of the sealed doors in the dunes, had a new quest for players. They said their cannon was ready, and with just a few fish, they could blow open the doors. Supplying them with the sufficient seafood, we receive one more quest, this time to press the big button and blow the doors wide open. What lies before us is a serene sight. With lush greenery and filled with purples and nice cool colors, the Twilight Realm is a nice view. The NPCs there are kinda judgy though. The strange nature of it makes some sense as being the Sunman's origin, but it still feels a little too serene for him. We can wander around and talk with some NPCs to grab a few quests and get a better vibe of the place. They recognize you as an outsider, but generally allow you in. The main character of note, Kuzo, is the Twilight Guardian. He discusses the connection between the worlds. They've been connected, once again, thanks to someone or something from our side. There is other evidence the realms are once connected, such as a quest where you help a member of the Twilight Realm reconnect with their lover on our realm. They're found to be long departed. This doesn't give us an exact time frame, but given the passing of the lover and the fact that the other NPC seems to see this as a completely foregone conclusion, knowing the mortal life that we live on our realm, it gives us a good idea that it's been a quite long time. The Twilight Realm offers a small handful of quests and a unique spot to fish in, but unfortunately this is about where the new evidence ends. Kuzo offers a couple quests about fetching some fish for him, and there's a couple other NPCs to interact with, sell items to, or buy new upgrades from. But we don't really get any more in terms of lore about the Twilight Realm or the Sunman. So, where does this leave us? Well, to recap, it's pretty likely that the Sunman has a body count now. Unless someone else decided to murk those two event hosts, it's more than likely they were his doing, and that deconfirms any idea that the Sunman isn't hostile. Of course, we don't know the exact how or why of how it happened. We don't even know if Oscar actually died or simply went missing. And for all we know, Bungo could have just slipped, or his head just did that. But we are ultimately left with one dead NPC and two missing, possibly dead NPCs, where the only major thing that we can assume got them in was the Sunman. The notes in the lighthouse also suggest a couple different things. It could mean that Norman is behind all of the notes across the game, perhaps traveling to the dunes and the swamp, either in search of the Sunman or simply seeing him in his time there, and creating the notes as a sort of warning. The notes could still alternatively suggest that multiple people have seen and wrote about the Sunman to warn others, though given a consistent art style between the notes, I would say the safest bet is that they're all from one shared author. It could even be possible that it's an unknown party, but then that raises the question of how they got into the lighthouse. Perhaps if it is an unknown NPC, it could have been someone who had the pyramid for whatever reason, perhaps another explorer or the like. But that pyramid itself is also a big mystery. If it was in Norman's possession, perhaps it was why the Sunman was after him. Maybe he found it in the cave or right during the cave-in, or perhaps he's had it sometime before then. After all, Ozama said that someone used it to break him free, but then the question arises of how that process even happened in the first place. It's not likely Norman would have done that if it's something you really have to go out of your way for. But if it's something that's as easy as simply interacting with this artifact, maybe he could have done it without realizing. And then, of course, there's all we learned about the Twilight Realm, seeming to be his origin. It's likely that the Shadow Realm might be something that exists within the Twilight Realm, if they're not meant to be the same thing. Perhaps the Shadow Realm being almost like a hell for the Twilight Realm. But Twilight and Shadow being such similar words, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just meant to be the same thing. The Sunman's otherworldly abilities and appearance seem to be a little more justified, but even then, it isn't as if the Twilight Realm is a completely alien place to our realm. The NPCs there are simply dragons and other slightly supernatural creatures, but fundamentally pretty similar to the NPCs we have. The landscape is definitely unique, but not entirely inhospitable or too unlike something we could see in our realm. Ultimately, it makes me question if the Sunman is still a natural resident of this realm, or some kind of deity, demon, or even a creation of some sort. If he's not just from a different realm entirely, we have very little to go off of outside of the fact that he was imprisoned in the Shadow Realm. With what we have, I don't really have much else to go with, but I will posit one theory. I had already believed that the notes indicated the Sunman had a greater presence on Tanglewood and the Luxian Dunes. With Norman, the lighthouse notes, and the artifacts, I now have a bit more of a theory to go off of. I believe that the Sunman, though he could appear on any island from what I know, is mainly stalking the dunes, the lighthouse, and Tanglewood, and there's a reason for each of those. The dunes is most obvious, being not only a more ancient civilization, therefore something he might be more familiar with as an ancient being, but it has a direct connection to the Twilight Realm, which he seemed to once call home. The lighthouse he stalks for the artifact, and for Norman himself. Perhaps it could also be why he was on the Crescent Isles, presuming that Norman either found the artifact there, or had the artifact on his person during the cave-in. While we don't really seem to have an idea of the artifact's abilities, my main guess would be that it's some kind of more universal key. It broke the Sunman out of the Shadow Realm. Perhaps it could also be responsible for creating the portal between the realms that we see now. It could even be responsible for other realm manipulating abilities, perhaps something more sinister that he's after. But it's hard to know for sure without really knowing what the artifact is capable of. Lastly is Tanglewood, which I have a hard time finding any hard evidence for, but my mind goes back to just one place, the church. Especially given the giant eye there, I have to believe there's some kind of supernatural power there. He could be stalking it due to it maybe posing a threat to him. After all, the priest can purify cursed fish. Maybe she could do something similar to him. Or perhaps he's seeking out something there. Or maybe it could just simply be the air of death from the graveyard. But that's all just theorization, and that's all we really have in this new update. Going off this pattern though, I'm sure next update we can expect to see even more of this mystery. As for me, well, if the mythos and story behind the Sunman becomes a lot more entangled with the game's main narrative, or I guess the closest thing you could call a narrative, I don't really know if I'm gonna feel like covering it much more. Not that there's anything wrong with it becoming part of the main plot, or that I have an issue with that. It just begins to stray away a bit more from the whole mystery aspect that I really enjoyed in making the first video. I did get to pick up some crumbs of evidence here that I didn't think I would at first, and do some theorizing, but still, this felt a little more like doing a walkthrough than a full-on mystery investigation. And at that point, I feel like it's better just let people enjoy it themselves. There's times when I enjoy doing more of a sort of walkthrough analysis, but I generally try to avoid that, at least when I feel there really isn't too much I could be adding, or just nothing that I can make super unique. I really don't want to become one of those YouTubers who just summarizes without adding too much themselves. I also think it's worth saying that I'm not really like a huge VR chat guy or anything. I really don't have great VR equipment, and I mostly just play it to hang out with my friends. I wouldn't really say I'm in the VRC culture too much, and especially not for the fish community, if there really even is one. Even if it doesn't really matter all that much, I don't know if I feel qualified to be a sort of figurehead for this kind of investigation. This is all to say I don't really expect to come back to this mystery anytime soon. Not to say I won't ever, but if it continues just being something as part of a main questline, then if you want to check it out, go play it for yourself. And if you don't want to go play it for yourself, well, I don't know if I'm really the kind of person just to make walkthroughs of these kinds of story explanations. Maybe if there's deep themes to analyze in the Sunman story, maybe I'll come back when it's all said and done. I might return to VR in the future though. I've had an interest in checking out strange or unique VR chat worlds and making videos on those if I could find enough and really have enough to say on them. That said, that might also be waiting on me to get a better headset or equipment, or maybe get my own custom model if I feel really egotistical. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, and hey, if you enjoyed this and other similar topics, maybe check out my other videos or subscribe. I still feel weird doing like the YouTuber thing like that, but it really does mean a lot to get your guys' support. I know this is a bit of a shorter and less meaty video after a bit of a hiatus. As I said in some community posts, I was quite busy and just didn't have as much time or motivation to record, but hopefully I should be back to that. I expect to have another video out, hopefully soon, and I've got a couple ideas bouncing around for the next few months. Only time will tell, especially with other obligations I've got to worry about, but I hope to have at least a couple more videos for the end of the year for you guys. I've also opened up a Patreon for those of you who want to support me some more. I'm sure you've heard this spiel from other YouTubers, but I do this in my spare time as a fun little side gig, and even with the success I've had so far, it only brings in so much. And I don't want to be greedy, but like, I need money. I'm not the most financially independent person, so every little bit helps, and it keeps me motivated to keep working. I don't plan to do anything Patreon exclusive per se. I might have some bonus videos and behind the scenes stuff on there, but I don't really want anything that's going to force people to want to pay for it. The main thing you're just going to be paying for is having your name appear in my videos, but you'll get some access to some little behind the scenes things that I might or may not post other places too. If you can't or don't want to pay for the Patreon though, there's no stress. Just watching my videos and supporting me normally still helps a lot, and I'm super thankful for all the support. I feel like I say it all the time, but it's been almost half a year now since that first Snowman video blew up, and it's still surreal to me to see the views and subs that I have right now. I really am thankful for the platform I have. I'll stop getting on the soapbox because I've already had this outro run for too long, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you again next time.